Biden administration has released more than 13,000 records into the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. But thousands more documents are still being held. All of the files should have been made public under a 1992 law. And with yesterday's release, about 90% of all documents related to the 98%, related to the 1963 assassination have now been made public. Just 3% of the records remain redacted in whole or in part, according to the National Archives, which controls the JFK assassination records collection.
All right, let's bring in NBC senior national political reporter Mark Caputo. He's been covering this story. Mark, let's start with you. You know, it seems like they released all the records we needed to see, except the records that we needed to see. Like, for instance, the shadowy CIA figure that ran the covert Cuba operation who met Oswald 4 months before the assassination. They decided not to release those records. What gives?
Right. The guy's name is George Joannides. And under the 1992 law that Mika just referenced, it created the structure to have a warehouse, a JFK collection under the National Archives. Well, the documents that this nonprofit group that sued to get all of these records released, the Mary Ferrell Foundation, had found in separate sort of reporting and snooping around, there are probably about 44 records related to George Joannides that never made it into the JFK collection. So as a result, when the Biden administration's like, woohoo, we've released all these records, look at all the transparency, the reality is that there are these records about George Joannides' pro-Castro, or better said, anti-Castro group, that somehow came into contact with Lee Harvey Oswald 4 months before the shooting. Lee Harvey Oswald somehow went to Mexico, somehow made contact with the Cuban and Soviet embassies and built up his name publicly as a pro-Castro sympathizer. And so immediately after the shooting, all of a sudden the news media and the public had all this access to Lee Harvey Oswald sort of being a communist and, again, a pro-Castro sympathizer. And all of a sudden, at the time, right after the shooting, there was this belief that, oh, my God, it's the communists who did it. It's the communists who are behind it. At the same time, there's an operation that was being launched and considered by the Pentagon called Operation Northwoods, which was designed to stage a spectacular false flag terrorist attack in the United States to blame on Castro. And lo and behold, here you have Lee Harvey Oswald. A lot of suspicious stuff, a lot of strange stuff. And the other aspect of George Joannides, whose identity and role in all of this only came out as a result of this law in 1992. Only in the 90s did we find this stuff out. By the way, he died in 1990. Joannides had been appointed after his retirement, pulled out of retirement by the CIA, to be a liaison with the House Investigative Committee in 1976. And the CIA and Joannides never told the House panel, the general counsel, the investigators, hey, by the way, I was involved in this program that made contact with Lee Harvey Oswald 4 months before the shooting. And the CIA to this day will not answer the question why he lied.
So, Mark, if in fact Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone, as the Warren Commission concluded almost 60 years ago, I guess the question is, why not release all the documents to prove that point? Why keep 4,300 or so, at least partially redacted, to allow the conspiracy theories to continue to fester? What's in those documents? Is there a chance at some point we'll see the rest of this stuff?
I think eventually we will. It's just bound to happen. You're asking the eternal question in this case, like, what are they hiding? I think Michael answered it pretty well. In a light most favorable to the government, they're hiding the fact that there were just all of these problems. The CIA, the Defense Department, everything, these are organizations, they're organisms. They have their own culture. They grow, they reproduce, they protect their own. And it's just become part of the culture, and it is the culture of the CIA. It's a spy agency to be secretive. And it's also part of the national security establishment. What's interesting in the lawsuit from the Mary Ferrell Foundation is one of the things they asked for is the disclosure of a 1961 memo. This is 2 years before the shooting of John F. Kennedy, from Arthur Schlesinger to Kennedy, saying, hey, let's disband the CIA. Let's get rid of it, because Kennedy wanted to do that after the disastrous Bay of Pigs invasion. Now, this really has nothing to do with the conspiracy to shoot JFK. Again, this is 2 years before that happens. And this is just a historical memo. And the reason the Mary Ferrell Foundation asked for that to be disclosed was just as kind of a trial balloon, a test, just to see, hey, is the government going to release this basic historical information? We found out yesterday the answer to that question. It's no. So the document is there, and there are these redactions in it which make no sense. The Biden administration and the various federal agencies, including but not limited to the CIA, are saying, look, we need to protect this information from the public because these are sources and methods, and we don't want to endanger national security. Everyone who spent time looking at this, including various people involved in the various investigations from the government, say that that explanation is just bunk. It's not true. It's false.